I want you to take a moment and just think about this. Everything around you, everything that exists belongs to God. Not just the mountains or the oceans or the stars. I mean everything, even the wealth that people chase, the businesses, the property, the opportunities, even the influence that seems to move around the world. All of it is under his ownership. God doesn't just oversee creation from a distance. He is intimately aware of every resource, every accumulation, every hidden treasure, and nothing escapes his attention. And that changes everything about how we see the world, how we see our own lives, and how we understand the flow of wealth and opportunity. So when you see someone building an empire for selfish gain, someone maybe hoarding wealth or manipulating resources or even advancing at the expense of others, it might feel unfair in the moment. And the human instinct tells us to panic, to resent, or even to compete in the same way. But here is the reality. Nothing that exists outside of God's plan can last in a way that ultimately matters. Every accumulation, every success, every empire, even if it looks permanent, is temporary if it exists apart from his purpose. He allows human activity, including the accumulation of wealth, but always within his sovereign oversight. Every resource is accounted for, every plan is observed, and every potential transfer of blessing is measured against his perfect timing and wisdom. As someone founded in Christ, this knowledge should be incredibly freeing. It means that we don't have to be anxious about the visible inequalities around us. We don't have to chase or hoard out of fear or envy because we understand that God is the ultimate steward of all resources. When we align our hearts and our actions with Him, we are participating in a kingdom economy where blessings are not earned by manipulation or deceit, but are given according to His perfect wisdom. Living in this reality means reflecting on how we handle what we already have. It calls for a mindset of stewardship in our ownership, patience rather than anxiety, and faithfulness rather than self reliance. It asks us to trust that God sees everything and that ultimately His redistribution ensures that the righteous receive what they are due. Today, let that sink in. God owns it all, and we are invited to walk confidently and faithfully within the framework of His sovereign plan. And there are people in this world who build their wealth through manipulation, through greed, or through shortcuts that leave others at a disadvantage. They hoard resources, they push for influence, and they create empires that seem untouchable. At first glance, it might feel like they have won, like their success is permanent. And it's easy to feel frustrated or even fearful when you see it happening. But the truth is, God sees it all. Every action, every scheme, every accumulation is under His careful observation. Nothing escapes His notice, and nothing exists outside His sovereign oversight. God does not have to act immediately. He doesn't need to intervene the moment injustice occurs because His perspective is beyond ours. Timing is a part of His plan, and every empire built with deceit or selfish gain is temporary in His eyes. Every hidden treasure, every accumulation, every advancement that comes at the expense of integrity is measured against His perfect wisdom. He watches, He allows, and He prepares the proper moment for correction, redistribution, or blessing. This divine observation is not passive, it's intentional. God is orchestrating the flow of resources in ways that are invisible to us, ensuring that what belongs to the righteous will eventually be restored. As someone founded in Christ, this understanding transforms how you experience the world. You don't need to panic when you see the wicked prosper, and you don't need to try to outmaneuver the world on your own. God's timing is perfect, and His observation ensures that nothing is lost and nothing is overlooked. Your focus shifts from envy or anxiety to faithfulness, knowing that He is watching, He's measuring, and he is preparing the right moment for his justice and provision to be revealed. This perspective calls for patience and discernment. It asks you to reflect on how you respond when others appear to be ahead, when maybe systems seem unfair, or even when manipulation seems to succeed. The key is to trust that God's observation is active and purposeful, and that he will act in the precise moment that aligns with his kingdom plan. Today, let that sink in. You don't need to control or compete against the schemes of the world because God already sees them. He already measures them. And he is already orchestrating the perfect redistribution for the righteous. Your role is to remain faithful and steady and aligned with him as he works the unseen. Look around the world and notice the empires that appear unstoppable. There are businesses, institutions, and fortunes that seem permanent, almost untouchable. At first glance, it's easy to admire the scale and sophistication, to think that some people have just figured out how to secure their place and wealth in this world. But when you dig deeper, when you look beneath the surface, you see a very different reality. Many of these structures are built on shaky ground. They are founded on self interest or deceit and ambition that ignores God's guidance. And no matter how strong they appear, they are temporary. God ensures that any wealth accumulated without obedience will never secure lasting advantage. Consider for a moment the contrast between earthly foundations and kingdom foundations. A building constructed on sand may look impressive, but the first storm reveals its instability. In the same way, material wealth and influence built apart from God may prosper for a season, but it is vulnerable to collapse. God's sovereignty ensures that obedience, integrity, and alignment with his will create stability that no human manipulation can replicate. This principle applies not only to the wicked who hoard and exploit, but also to the way we manage our own lives. Every decision we make, every resource we steward, every relationship we cultivate has a foundation. So ask yourself, is it God centered? Is it rooted in obedience and faith? Or is it self centered? Maybe dependent on your cleverness and temporary gain? Because when you understand that God watches and governs even the smallest, minute details, it shifts the way you approach your own plans and ambitions. Wealth that is earned honestly, influence that is exercised with integrity, and resources that are stewarded faithfully are never wasted. Even if the reward seems slow to arrive, they are protected by God's oversight, and their value carries both material and eternal significance. Faith in Christ invites you to reflect on the durability of what you are building. It challenges you to prioritize obedience over expediency, purpose over prestige, and kingdom impact over immediate accumulation. Stability in life and in provision comes from God, not from human cunning. Today, take inventory of your foundations and be honest with yourself. Are you relying on God's wisdom and timing? Or are you trying to secure your future on your own understanding? The answer will determine not just your successes in the present, the enduring fruit that lasts way into eternity. Sometimes it feels like the world moves too fast, doesn't it? You see people rising, gaining influence, acquiring wealth, and it can make your heart race with impatience. You want what's coming to you now. But in God's kingdom, timing is never random, and the transfer of blessing is never accidental. The righteous often wait, not because they are passive, but because they understand that God's timing ensures the fullness of every provision. Waiting without envy or haste is a kingdom posture. It's a discipline, a reflection of trust in the one who owns everything and orchestrates the flow of all resources. Think about the way God observes the world. The wicked accumulate, they hoard, they manipulate, and sometimes it looks like they have secured every advantage. But God measures every accumulation, every empire, every hidden treasure against his plan. Remember Joseph in Egypt? Though Potiphar's house and Pharaoh's kingdom were controlled by others, God positioned Joseph to inherit influence and provide for his people at exactly the right time. There is a precise moment when the resources, the influence, or the opportunities the wicked have amassed are redistributed to the righteous. Patience aligns you with this divine rhythm rather than the frantic scramble of human impatience. The key is to focus on faithfulness in the present rather than obsessing over what has not yet been transferred. As someone who is functioning in Christ, this principle transforms how you experience waiting. You no longer see delay as denial or neglect. You begin to recognize that waiting is the space in which God prepares the blessing. That's where He secures the transfer. And that is where He ensures that what comes to you is both stable and purposeful. Your role is to remain attentive. Be diligent and obedient in the small things, trusting that God's timing will never fail. The transfer of resources, whether they are material or relational or influential, arrives when the foundation has been properly laid, when you are ready to steward it with wisdom and integrity. Today, let that patience become your practice. Reflect on the ways you may have maybe rushed or envied or grasped for provision prematurely. Consider how your impatience may have diverted you from God's intended transfer. Kingdom waiting is not inactivity, it is disciplined alignment with God's sovereign plan. By choosing trust over urgency, by choosing faith over anxiety and obedience over self reliance, you position yourself to receive the blessings that God has prepared specifically for you. His timing is perfect and His redistribution is precise. Waiting well is not simply enduring. No, it is active preparation to receive what the righteous are meant to inherit. When we think about wealth, it's easy to imagine it as a reward, maybe a marker of success, or even as a shield against life's uncertainties. But in the kingdom of God, wealth is never meant to be a trophy. Resources are a tool, a means to fulfill purpose, to honor God, and to extend blessing to others. God entrusts wealth to the faithful not simply as a reward, but as a test of stewardship. How we manage what we have, both materially and spiritually, reveals our heart and alignment with His kingdom. Consider the story of the talents in the Bible. 3 servants were given varying amounts, and each one was expected to manage what their master entrusted to them. The one who buried his talent out of fear and selfishness lost even what he was given. The others who invested wisely and acted faithfully multiplied their portion and received the master's commendation. This story is not just about money. It's about responsibility. It's about wisdom and faithfulness. The principle here is clear. God tests us through the resources that we already possess, that He has given us, and our response determines our capacity for greater provision. As someone walking in Christ, this calls for careful reflection. Ask yourself, how do I treat the resources I already have? Do I see them as mine to hoard, or as tools to manage and grow and use for kingdom impact? Stewardship is not about the size of what we possess. It's about the attitude and wisdom we bring to it. Even small resources, when managed faithfully, position us to participate in God's redistribution. Wealth, influence, and opportunity, these are all entrusted to us temporarily, and how we handle them determines whether God will multiply them. Living in this reality requires humility and intentionality. It requires a daily awareness that God owns everything, that His resources are never for selfish gain, and that every blessing comes with responsibility. Stewardship shapes character. It builds your faith and aligns with God's purposes. It transforms fear of scarcity into confidence in His provision, and it ensures that when divine redistribution comes, we are ready to receive it wisely. Today, take stock of what you already have, whether it be your finances or your influence, perhaps even your time and your relationships. Reflect on how you can manage these resources not for self-glory, but to honor God and to serve others. Wealth in the hands of the faithful becomes a tool for kingdom impact, not a trophy for personal pride. And trust me, the glory you receive from self congratulations pales in comparison to the glory God bestows on his favored ones. Sometimes it feels like life is all about what we can see. We measure progress by accounts or opportunities or titles or possessions. We watch others rise and wonder why our own advancement feels delayed. But in God's kingdom, not all movement is visible, and not every transfer is obvious. Many of the most significant redistributions happen unseen. Opportunities, influence, guidance, favor, and even resources are often shifted quietly behind the scenes, orchestrated perfectly according to God's sovereign plan. Because let's be honest, God does not have to explain his every move to us. So it's easy to grow anxious when the world operates according to human perception. We want to see results immediately. We want tangible confirmation. And we often equate delay with denial. Yet faith calls us to a different perspective. Faith doesn't require constant evidence or immediate outcomes. It discerns the invisible work of God. It allows us to trust that even when we cannot see the transfer of resources or when we feel overlooked or delayed, God is actively moving things into place for the righteous. This is not passive waiting thought, right? It's an active trust. It's coupled with faithful stewardship of what we already have right now. Invisible transfers can take many forms. They might appear as unexpected connections, maybe opportunities that open at the right moment. Perhaps open doors that seem coincidental but are divinely positioned, or maybe even influence that expands quietly before anyone even starts to notice. God moves resources, both tangible and intangible, in ways that align perfectly with his purposes, often preparing the groundwork before the blessing becomes visible. By recognizing this, we stop competing for what is seen and stop positioning ourselves for what is coming, trusting that his timing and methods are flawless. Living with this perspective transforms how we approach life. It encourages patience, it cultivates discernment, and redirects our focus from comparison to alignment. We learn to operate faithfully in our current sphere, running your own race, so to speak, knowing that God's unseen hand is shaping outcomes, it's opening doors and transferring blessings in his perfect order. We also develop confidence in God's process, realizing that what is unseen is just as powerful, just as real, and often more impactful than what is immediately visible. Today, let yourself rest in the reality that God is moving even when you cannot see it. Faith positions you to recognize and receive these invisible transfers, while impatience and envy distract from the blessings that are already prepared. Trust that God's redistribution is precise, it is purposeful, and unfolding exactly as it should. Your role is to remain faithful and attentive and patient as his invisible hand works on your behalf. Take a moment to consider the work you do every day, whether it's your job, your business, your studies, or even the unseen efforts that shape your relationships and responsibilities. Every task, every effort, and every decision carries weight in God's economy. Honest work done under his principles produces reward in ways that go beyond the immediate or visible. The righteous reap benefit, not only in material terms, but in influence, in opportunity, and spiritual growth. Labor aligned with kingdom values always yields proportional blessing, even when it seems slow or unnoticed. It's tempting to look at the world and compare ourselves to others who take shortcuts or manipulate systems for personal gain. At times, their success can appear faster or easier, and it's natural to feel somewhat discouraged. But God's redistribution operates differently. He observes every act of diligence, every effort invested with integrity, and every choice made with faithfulness. Your labor, even if it seems ordinary or unnoticed, is never wasted. When your work reflects obedience to his principles, such as honesty, accountability, such as fairness, even, and generosity, then you are sowing into an economy that guarantees long-term fruit and reward. This invites reflection on the quality of your labor. Are you pursuing success for personal recognition, or are you focused on aligning your work with God's kingdom purposes? Are your actions motivated by integrity, even when no one is watching? Or are they driven by expediency and self interest? Honest labor builds a foundation that God can use to bless and multiply and redirect resources toward the righteous. It positions you to receive opportunities that are proportional to your faithfulness, and it ensures that the blessings you gain are sustainable, not fleeting. Living with this mindset changes how you approach daily responsibilities. It transforms work from a mere necessity into an act of kingdom participation. It teaches patience and perseverance, reminding you that God rewards according to his wisdom and timing. It also fosters confidence and peace, knowing that diligence and integrity are never overlooked, even when the results are not immediately visible. Today, take stock of how you labor and the integrity you bring to every task. Examine your intentions and your efforts. Seek to align your work with God's kingdom purposes, trusting that every honest effort contributes to your long-term blessing. Labor faithfully, act with integrity, and understand that God's rewards are proportional. They are precise and rooted in his perfect economy. Sometimes it can feel like injustice has the upper hand. You watch the wicked prosper, see selfishness rewarded, or witness systems stacked in favor of those who manipulate and hoard. In those moments, it's easy to feel impatient or even cynical. But God's economy does not operate like the world's. Injustice may flourish temporarily, but divine principles correct iniquity across generations. God observes and measures and orchestrates outcomes so that the righteous ultimately benefit from what the wicked have accumulated. This is a kingdom reality that requires patience and trust and a perspective that looks beyond immediate appearances. Think of how often history demonstrates this particular principle. Entire families and communities or even nations have experienced delayed blessings or prolonged struggle, only for God's timing to reveal justice and provision later, sometimes decades later. What appeared lost or overlooked or unfair is often restored or multiplied at precisely the right moment. Even in our own personal lives, we can reflect on seasons where we felt delayed or ignored or overshadowed, and later recognize how God's hand was at work behind the scenes, preparing the resources, preparing the opportunities, or perhaps the wisdom necessary for our benefit. Let's revisit Joseph's story one more time. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. He endured years of hardship and apparent injustice. God's timing ensured that Joseph not only rose to leadership in Egypt, but also became the means of provision for his family and an entire nation. God's orchestration of justice, of opportunity, and blessing often spans years, and patience allows the righteous to align themselves with his perfect timing. Because when Joseph was going through all of this, he somehow still maintained his faith, and he continued to interpret dreams until the day it became his superpower. Reflecting on this, it becomes clear that impatience or envy only distracts us from participating faithfully in God's plan. While the world may appear chaotic or unfair, the righteous can trust that divine correction operates over time. The wealth, influence, and provision accumulated by the wicked are never beyond God's oversight. Through his redistribution, the righteous receive what is due, often multiplied in ways that the human eye or brain could never anticipate or calculate. Today, consider your own perspective on delayed blessing and apparent injustice. Ask yourself, how can you remain faithful and patient while God works invisibly? Recognize that seasons of waiting are not seasons of loss. They are periods of preparation, alignment, and refinement. Divine correction ensures that the righteous ultimately gain, and the kingdom economy always balances in accordance with God's perfect wisdom and timing. When we think about God's provision, It's natural to focus first on money or material resources, but in his kingdom, provision goes far beyond physical currency or possessions. God's redistribution includes influence, wisdom, strategic opportunities, and connections that shape the course of our lives and the impact we have on others, and not just for today either, for generations to come, even. These are just as real, they are just as valuable, and often more transformative than anything purely financial. Recognizing this expands the way we see God's work and opens our hearts to receive what He is already moving into place for us. Consider the way opportunity often arrives quietly. Maybe it's a conversation, an introduction, or maybe a moment of insight, or the right decision at the right time. That can create a cascade of impact that far exceeds what material wealth alone could accomplish. God moves behind the scenes, orchestrating these moments with precision. Yet receiving these kingdom transfers requires preparation, faithfulness in small things, diligence in your current responsibilities, and a heart aligned with His purpose position you to recognize, to receive, and to steward properly what He provides. Opportunities often pass by those who are distracted or anxious or unprepared. But the righteous who cultivate wisdom and humility and discernment are ready to step into what has already been set aside for them. Influence is a form of wealth. Your reputation, your integrity, your voice, and your ability to guide or inspire others are resources God can entrust to you. When aligned with kingdom purpose, influence becomes a multiplier for every other provision. It ensures that God's redistribution is effective and far reaching. The strategic opportunities He places in your path often leverage your influence and wisdom, preparing the way for more tangible blessings to follow. Reflect today on your readiness. How prepared are you to receive what God is redistributing? Are you cultivating discernment and patience and faithfulness, or are you distracted by worldly measures of success? True readiness comes from alignment with God's principles, such as integrity and generosity and obedience. It also comes from trusting that He is orchestrating transfers, even when they are unseen, ensuring that His resources, His influence, and opportunities reach the people He intends. Your role is not to chase or manipulate, but to prepare, to steward, and act faithfully in your sphere. By doing so, you position yourself to receive kingdom transfers fully, whether material, relational, or strategic. God's provision is holistic, and when you recognize it, you begin to participate in the flow of influence and opportunity that shapes both your life and the lives of others in ways that last far beyond temporary wealth. Think about the life you are living right now, not just for today, but for the future that you are shaping, right? God's kingdom operates on a principle that goes beyond immediate gain. Wealth, influence, favor, and opportunity naturally flow toward those whose hearts and actions align with His ways. This isn't simply about what you have today, it's about the inheritance that you are cultivating. It's about the legacy that will outlive you and the impact that will ripple across generations. Every choice you make, every act of integrity, every decision to steward resources faithfully contributes to a larger pattern of kingdom inheritance. Instead of asking yourself, am I receiving enough right now? Consider asking, what am I leaving behind that will outlast me? Legacy is not just financial. It is the influence you have in the lives of others, the wisdom that you pass on, and the principles that you uphold, and even the faithfulness that you model. These are the elements of inheritance that God values the most. When your life reflects obedience and generosity and patience, you're creating a foundation for others to inherit, not just materially, but spiritually and relationally. Think about how every interaction, every decision, every opportunity you steward, and how it has the potential to multiply beyond what you can see right now. Even the smallest faithful acts contribute to a ripple effect of blessing. Your dedication, your integrity, and your alignment with God's principles position you to receive and to pass on resources and influence and wisdom that cannot be taken away by worldly circumstances. The righteous inherit in ways that are lasting because their lives are constructed on eternal principles rather than temporary gain. Now, consider your own sphere of influence, like your relationships and your work and your use of resources. Yeah? Are the seeds that you are planting right now aligned with God's kingdom and intended to benefit others faithfully over time? Think of your actions not as isolated decisions, but as contributions to a larger inheritance. What you cultivate right now in faith and obedience will shape the opportunities, blessings, and influence that flow to those who follow you. Living with a legacy mindset allows you to participate actively in God's redistribution, ensuring that what you receive and what you steward contributes to something eternal. It's practical and it's immediate. Every act of faithful stewardship today, every choice made with integrity is part of a living inheritance that God is preparing, both for you and for those who will come after. Look at the wealth that surrounds us in the world. Look at the large estates, the sprawling businesses, or the fortunes that seem untouchable. At first glance, it's easy to be impressed. Human achievement appears unstoppable. Yet when you examine the nature of that accumulation, you notice a pattern. Much of it is built on selfishness, manipulation, or short-term gain. Foundations constructed without regard for God, for integrity, or for the well-being of others are inherently fragile. No matter how large the empire seems, it is vulnerable to collapse. And history shows time and again that these empires rarely endure. Greed drives accumulation in ways that ignore the principles of God's kingdom. While the wicked may appear to prosper for a season, their advantage is temporary, fleeting, and it's unpredictable. They invest in what they can control, often hoarding, manipulating, or exploiting resources to secure their position. God, however, observes these activities with perfect awareness. Nothing escapes his notice, and he allows such accumulation only within the scope of his sovereign plan. Every act of selfish gain carries an inherent instability because it is disconnected from divine purpose. By contrast, the redistribution that God orchestrates towards the righteous is anchored in enduring principles. Wealth, influence, and opportunity given to those aligned with his ways are reinforced by faithfulness and obedience and stewardship. Unlike empires built on greed, these transfers carry stability, longevity, and a kingdom impact that extends far beyond the immediate or invisible. God's redistribution demonstrates that value is not determined by human cunning, but by alignment with his purpose and timing. Consider your own perspective on resources and success. Are you chasing temporary gain, or are you building on principles that align with God's economy? Even in your personal life, this principle applies. Integrity and faithful stewardship create durable advantages, while selfishness or short sighted decisions produce instability and loss. Observing the contrast between fleeting wealth and enduring provision encourages discernment and patience. The lesson here is clear. Impressive accumulation alone does not equal security. The wicked may build empires, but their foundations are inherently unstable, while God's redistributions to the righteous are measured, purposeful, and lasting. The fragile nature of selfish wealth serves as a reminder to align every action, every investment, and every decision with God's principles. This could mean you're investing in education, mentoring others, starting a business that solves real problems, or building relationships rooted in integrity, tangible areas that produce lasting impact. When we steward what we receive in ways that create value for others and honor God, we ensure that our resources contribute to enduring advantage rather than temporary gain. We live in a world that often celebrates accumulation as an indicator of success. Money, influence, opportunity, and assets are praised, and the pressure to acquire more can be relentless. But in God's kingdom, not all accumulation is righteous. Just because something grows or prospers, it doesn't mean it aligns with his principles. Spiritual discernment is essential to recognize the difference between what is kingdom aligned and what is exploitative or self serving. Without wisdom, it's easy to be drawn into pursuits that appear fruitful on the surface, but carry hidden costs to your integrity, your relationships, or even long term blessing. When examining your own sources of provision, it's worth asking deeper questions. Are the ways I acquire wealth or influence reflecting God's values of stewardship, generosity, and integrity? Am I benefiting at the expense of others, or am I participating in growth that serves His kingdom? Spiritual discernment goes beyond practical skill or business acumen. It is a matter of aligning your heart and your action with God's principles. It is the lens through which every opportunity, every investment, or gain should be evaluated. Consider how easily exploitation can masquerade as success. The world may reward cunning, manipulation, or selfish strategies, but these methods always carry hidden instability. The accumulation built on deception, greed, or harm may appear impressive for a season, but it lacks the endurance that God's redistribution provides. In contrast, growth that is kingdom aligned, even if it's smaller or seems slower, carries long term instability. It multiplies in meaningful ways and positions you to receive further provision in alignment with God's timing. Discernment also shapes how we steward what we already have. Even righteous accumulation can be corrupted if approached without awareness. Regular evaluation of sources, methods, and outcomes ensures that your resources remain a tool for God's purposes rather than a means of self glorification. This kind of vigilance is not designed to produce fear or doubt inside of you, but to cultivate faithfulness. It's about walking in alignment with God's economy, trusting that the blessings you received are intended for kingdom impact rather than temporary advantage. Today, take personal inventory of your provisions, opportunities, and growth. Examine the motivations behind them, the methods that you've used to acquire them, and the purposes they serve. Spiritual discernment is what separates temporary, unstable accumulation from lasting, kingdom aligned provision. It protects integrity, it guides stewardship, and it ensures that what you receive and steward contributes to enduring blessing for yourself and others. It's easy to think about obedience in narrow terms, like following rules or doing what seems right in isolated moments. Yeah? But in God's kingdom, obedience is far more expansive. It produces fruit across multiple dimensions of life: material provision, spiritual growth, relational influence, and even eternal impact are all linked to living in alignment with His principles. When we obey, we are opening ourselves to a flow of blessing that is multidimensional and often unseen, extending well beyond immediate results that we might have been expecting. Think about how obedience shapes your daily actions. It may show up as diligence in your work, integrity in your financial dealings, or faithfulness in relationships. Each act of obedience, no matter how small, contributes to a pattern of trustworthiness and alignment with God's purposes. Materially, obedience allows God to redistribute resources to those who honor Him. Spiritually, it develops maturity and discernment and a sensitivity to His guidance. Relationally, obedience builds trust and influence, positioning you as a conduit for blessing to others. Eternally, it aligns your life with kingdom values that last beyond the temporal, ensuring that your efforts have impact that cannot be undone. It's important to recognize that multi-dimensional fruit doesn't always arrive immediately or in a form we tend to expect. Sometimes God's provision is unseen at first. It's an opportunity, a relationship, or wisdom that only becomes evident later. This is why faith and attentiveness are so crucial. Obedience prepares us to receive provision in every dimension, even when we may not yet see the reward. It also protects us from the instability and fleeting nature of wealth or influence obtained through self interest or manipulation. Consider the areas of your life where obedience feels challenging. Perhaps it's financial stewardship or integrity at work, maybe generosity towards others or patience in waiting for opportunities. Each choice you make in obedience can unlock unseen provision. whether it's resources, connections, or insights that may otherwise remain out of reach for you. Obedience is not simply compliance, it's an active, intentional alignment of your heart, your decisions, and your actions with God's principles. Today, approach your life with the perspective that every act of faithful obedience is an investment in multi-dimensional fruit. Material blessings, spiritual growth, relational influence, and eternal significance are all connected. By walking in obedience, you position yourself to receive and steward what God has prepared, ensuring that your life participates fully in the flow of His kingdom economy. Sometimes we see wealth, influence, or opportunity move from one person to another, immediately think of it in terms of gain or loss. But in God's kingdom, redistribution is not only about provision, it's also a teaching tool. Every time resources shift, whether visible or unseen, God is inviting us to learn, adjust, and to grow. He uses these movements to shape our hearts, to teach us humility, to cultivate gratitude, and develop patience within us, aligning us more closely with His kingdom principles. Humility is cultivated when we recognize that nothing truly belongs to us. Our possessions, our influence, and opportunities are entrusted to us, not earned solely by our effort or cunning. Observing redistribution reminds us that God is the ultimate owner of all things. It prompts us to release entitlement, acknowledge dependence on Him, and respond with a heart that sees provision as a gift rather than a right. Humility softens the soul, making it receptive to guidance and wisdom and further stewardship. Gratitude emerges when we recognize both what we have received and the unseen provisions that accompany it. God's redistribution may not always look like immediate material gain. Sometimes it comes as guidance, an opening door, or a connection that leads to a later blessing. Recognizing these transfers, even when subtle, encourages a lifestyle of thankfulness. Gratitude transforms perspective. It shifts focus from scarcity to abundance, and it deepens our trust in God's timing and wisdom. Patience is perhaps the most challenging lesson of all. Redistribution rarely happens according to human schedules or expectations. We may see others prosper temporarily and feel frustrated at delays in our own lives, yet God's timing is perfect. Waiting faithfully teaches endurance, it sharpens our discernment, and ensures that when blessings arrive, we are ready to receive it responsibly and wisely. Patience allows us to participate fully in the flow of God's kingdom economy, rather than reacting impulsively to what we see or what we think or feel like we deserve. As you consider how God has moved resources in your own life, consider the opportunities you have been granted, maybe the lessons you have learned, or even the blessings that have been redirected. And notice how each instance has shaped your character and prepared you for greater stewardship. The lesson here is clear, hey? Redistribution is not random or punitive. It is purposeful, it's formative, and deeply kingdom centered, designed to cultivate hearts that reflect God's principles in every area of life. It's easy to get caught up in the visible outcomes of life, to measure success by what's apparent, what's loud, or what seems immediate. We see some people accumulate wealth, influence, or opportunity and think they have gained the upper hand. Others may struggle or wait, wondering if fairness even exists. But in God's kingdom, justice often happens quietly beyond human sight. Invisible transfers, whether it's resources, opportunities, or influence, move according to His perfect plan. These unseen actions remind us that ultimate justice is divine, not determined by human perception. Think about the moments in your own life where timing, provision, or guidance appeared mysterious at first. Perhaps it was an opportunity that arrived unexpectedly, a connection that effectively materialized, or a challenge that was redirected in your favor. At the time, you may not have understood why things unfolded the way that they did, but looking back, the pattern becomes clear. God's hand was orchestrating outcomes in ways that humans could not see or control. Hidden justice does not eliminate the struggle or delay, but it does ensure that righteousness and faithfulness are never overlooked. History also gives countless examples of this principle. Individuals or communities who seem overlooked or oppressed or disadvantaged ultimately experienced provision, inheritance, or influence in ways that could not have been orchestrated by human effort alone. Resources accumulated by the self-serving were redirected to those who aligned with God's purposes. The seemingly invisible moments of justice reshaped outcomes, benefiting the righteous and establishing fairness according to kingdom principles. These stories, both personal and historical, remind us that God is always aware. He is always measuring and always acting, even when it's invisible to us. Recognizing hidden justice invites a different type of mindset. It encourages patience and faithfulness and trust. We no longer have to compete against the world's fleeting measures of advantage or feel resentment at visible inequality. Instead, we can align ourselves with God's principles. We can steward what we already have faithfully and trust that He will ensure redistribution in the right timing, in the right way, and to the right person. So today, take a moment to observe your own life with this perspective. Consider the ways God may have already acted behind the scenes to ensure fairness or redirect resources, and how your faithfulness positions you to participate in His kingdom economy. Hidden justice is real, it's consistent, and it's designed to reinforce that God alone determines true fairness beyond human sight or judgment. Let's take a moment and talk about the difference between how the world handles resources and how God handles them, because those two systems rarely line up. When you look at the world's economic logic, it's built on speed, visibility, and results that you can measure right now. It rewards whoever can move the fastest, cut the sharpest deal, or get ahead by any means necessary. When you shift into the kingdom, you quickly realize God is not driven by urgency or optics. He works through principles, and those principles shape the outcomes rather than the other way around. You may have moments where you feel like obedience is slowing you down. Maybe choosing honesty makes you look less competitive. Maybe giving to someone in need stretches you in a way that doesn't feel strategic. Maybe refusing a questionable opportunity means watching someone else advance while you stay exactly where you are. The world's economy tells you your value lies in what you can produce and how fast you can multiply it. God's economy tells you that multiplication comes from Him, and your responsibility is to stay aligned with His ways. When you take a step back and look at your own decisions, you start to notice where you have allowed worldly thinking to shape you. Maybe you've leaned too heavily into hustle culture and neglected the quiet guidance of the Holy Spirit. Maybe you've built your plans around what looks profitable instead of what is purposeful. Maybe you've been carrying pressure to provide for yourself, forgetting that provision was never meant to be a solo project. And here's the thing: God's economy is not less effective. It's just slower to reveal itself because it's building something deeper than financial wins. Think about the choices you make with your money, relationships, your time, even your ambitions. Do they reflect a belief that God governs your future? Or do they reveal a fear of missing out if you don't manage everything yourself? Realignment usually starts in small, practical adjustments. Choosing work, maybe that honors God, even if it pays a little less in the beginning. Investing in skills instead of shortcuts. Giving generously because you trust that God replenishes what you release. Prioritizing integrity over the illusion of advantage. As you make these kind of decisions, you begin to experience a different type of rhythm, become less frantic, more anchored, and ultimately far more fruitful. That's the difference between living in the world's economy and living in His. Take a moment to consider the resources in your life, like your time, your money, your influence, your skills, and your relationships. God gives provision not just to survive or accumulate, but to serve a higher purpose. Every blessing, every opportunity, every bit of influence is meant to align with your calling, your vocation, and the impact He intends for His kingdom. When provision is separated from purpose, it feels abundant, but it lacks direction and lasting significance. Many of us get caught in the rhythm of survival, earning just enough to get by, holding on tightly to what we have today, or chasing wealth for security's sake. There's nothing inherently wrong with meeting your needs, but God invites us to look deeper. Provision in His kingdom is always paired with responsibility. It is designed to advance not only our personal lives, but also the purpose of His kingdom. When we steward resources wisely, they become instruments for influence, generosity, and transformation that extends far beyond ourselves. Ask yourself, are the resources I've been given fueling only my comfort, or are they opening doors to meaningful impact? Is my work connected to my calling, or is it just a means to an end? Are my investments, whether financial, relational, or spiritual, aligned with kingdom outcomes, or do they simply protect me from scarcity? God's provision is always purposeful, and when we recognize it, we are positioned to participate in something much larger than ourselves. Alignment requires both reflection and action. Reflection allows us to evaluate whether we are investing our resources in ways that honor God and build kingdom impact. Action is the faithful implementation, whether it's applying skills to serve others, offering resources where they multiply lives, and pursuing opportunities that carry eternal significance. Even small choices, when aligned with purpose, can have ripple effects far beyond what we can imagine or measure. Ultimately, God's provision is never random. He designs it to match your vocation and calling, to equip you for the work He has entrusted to you. Living with this awareness shifts our perspective from mere accumulation to intentional stewardship. It helps us prioritize wisely, to invest boldly, and trust that every resource, every opportunity, and every blessing carries the potential to accomplish far more than we could ever do on our own. So today, examine the ways that your provision aligns or doesn't with the higher purposes that God has given you. Adjust, invest, and steward with intention, knowing that when provision meets purpose, your life participates fully in the kingdom economy. When we think about stewardship, it's easy to narrow it down to money or possessions. But true stewardship is far broader. It encompasses everything God entrusts to us: our time, our talents, our relationships, our influence, our resources. Recognizing that all of these belong to Him changes the way we approach every decision. Stewardship becomes sacred because it's not about personal gain. It's about managing what ultimately belongs to God in a way that honors His ownership and purposes. Consider your daily life, right? How do you spend your time? Do you invest it in pursuits that align with your calling, or do you allow it to slip into distractions that yield very little fruit for you? Time is one of the most powerful resources that God has given us, and managing it intentionally is an act of sacred stewardship. Each hour can be used to grow your skills, serve others, strengthen relationships, or deepen your understanding of His kingdom. Time wasted is a resource mismanaged, but time invested with purpose contributes to lasting impact. Talents are another form of stewardship. The skills, abilities, and gifts that God has placed in your hands are not solely for self advancement. When you cultivate and apply them in ways that serve others and advance God's purposes, your talents become instruments of kingdom influence. Stewardship here requires self awareness, practice, and courage to use your abilities wisely, even when the reward isn't immediate or visible. Treasures like material wealth and resources must also be managed with intention. Sacred stewardship means examining how you allocate what you have. Are your resources supporting generosity, kingdom projects, or ethical enterprises, or are they just hoarded, maybe spent impulsively or misaligned with God's principles? Stewardship demands that every investment, every dollar, every gift reflects obedience, integrity, and trust in God's timing. Ultimately, sacred stewardship is about alignment. It asks us to view everything we manage through the lens of God's ownership and purpose. It's a mindset, a daily discipline, if you will, and a kingdom principle. When you steward your time, your talent, and treasure with awareness of God's sovereignty, you transform ordinary management into acts of worship, responsibility, and influence. Today, pause and consider: how well does your management of your life's resources reflect God's ownership? Identify areas that need attention and realign them with kingdom priorities, and step into the sacred responsibility that God has entrusted to you. Stewardship is not optional, it's a tangible way to live faithfully under His rule. Have you ever experienced a moment when it became clear that God was actively involved in your life, moving resources and opportunities or favor in ways that confirmed your faith? These moments are not just coincidences, they're divine validations of trust, obedience, and integrity. Redistribution in God's kingdom is not random. It serves as a tangible reminder that faithfulness matters, that God notices, and that when we align ourselves with His principles, provision follows in ways both visible and unseen. Faith is often tested in the tension between what we see and what we know. We may work diligently, act honestly, and steward our resources wisely, yet the world seems to reward others who act selfishly, deceitfully, or aggressively. In these moments, it's easy to doubt. It's easy to question or grow impatient. But God's redistribution proves that his kingdom operates on principles that surpass human perception. The resources, influence, and opportunities he orchestrates for the righteous validate the integrity of faith in ways the world cannot imitate. Consider how this applies to you practically. Faith that is aligned with God's principles demonstrates that even when immediate results are not visible, obedience, patience, and generosity prepare you for redistribution. When God moves resources into your hands, it confirms that your faith is not misplaced. It proves that your trust in Him is productive and that integrity is rewarded according to His timing and wisdom. Redistribution acts like a signal. It says, I see your faith, I honor your obedience, and I will provide according to my plan. This validation also shapes our expectations. When we witness divine redistribution, whether through opportunities, financial provision, relationships, or influence, it strengthens our confidence in God's ongoing guidance. We begin to anticipate his movement, not with anxiety or greed, but with readiness, with discernment and responsibility. Faith grows when we recognize that God's kingdom is real and that his principles are reliable and that his provision always aligns with purpose. Take a moment to evaluate your life. Where has God already redistributed provision to validate your faith? How might he be preparing to move in ways that you cannot yet see? Recognizing these movements encourages integrity. It cultivates your expectancy and builds trust in his perfect timing. Redistribution is not just provision, it's proof, it's confirmation, and reinforcement that living faithfully in alignment with God's principles yields blessings in every dimension of life. Faith is validated in this instance, and with it comes both responsibility and opportunity. Nothing accumulates indefinitely without purpose. God allows people to gain, to build, to accumulate, but he also sets divine endpoints for everything. For the wicked, their hoarded wealth and self-serving empires can collapse without warning. For the righteous, what is aligned with God's principles flows into enduring advantage, blessing, and provision that serve both kingdom and life purposes. It's easy to be impressed by material success or visible power, and even easier to compare our own journey to those who seem to be ahead. Yet the visible accumulation of the world is fragile. It's often temporary and rarely eternal. Empires built on greed or deception or selfish ambition have a shelf life. A business, a career, or an investment may look unstoppable today, but without alignment to God's plan, it can vanish tomorrow. Understanding this helps us see impermanence not as a discouragement, but as clarity, encouraging us to invest in what actually lasts. For the righteous, accumulation is measured differently. God orchestrates provision. He orchestrates your influence and opportunities according to his timing and wisdom. These transfers may be gradual or unseen or appear small at first, but they are permanent in the sense that they serve a purpose. They align with vocation and yield lasting impact. Resources handled with integrity and faithfulness and obedience continue to produce fruit long after they first arrive. They are designed to endure, multiplying in ways that serve not only your personal life, but kingdom influence. Consider the contrast in this situation. The wicked may achieve and hoard and manipulate, but the endpoint of their efforts often leaves nothing of lasting value over time or over generations. The righteous may wait, steward carefully, act faithfully, yet the returns persist in ways that cannot be undone by circumstance or competition. This is a principle to anchor your thinking in the fact that accumulation is never an end in itself. It's a tool meant to be aligned with God's purposes, and when aligned, it produces permanence that the world cannot erase. So today, reflect on your own accumulation of resources or influence or relationships, and maybe your skills too. Are they being stewarded with kingdom alignment, or are they vulnerable to impermanence? Recognize that God alone defines that endpoint, and that by living in obedience and patience and faithfulness, you are positioned to receive the blessings He designs to endure. The endpoint is not about what you see right now, it's about what lasts forever. It's easy to look at God's provision and feel impatient. We want the blessings, we want the opportunities, we want the transfers of wealth and influence to appear quickly, visibly, and immediately. But in the kingdom, timing is everything. Receiving what God has prepared often requires both patience and preparation. Waiting is not a passive period. It's an active, disciplined season where faith, readiness, and alignment with His principles position you to fully benefit when the transfer arrives. Think about your own life. Are you cultivating the skills, relationships, and mindset that will allow you to steward what comes? Are you learning patience in seasons of scarcity? Are you practicing generosity even when your resources feel limited? And are you remaining faithful in integrity even when shortcuts seem easier? These moments are not wasted time. They are the preparation that God uses to ensure that the provision He orchestrates is received and managed well. Waiting also helps to refine your perspective. Human impatience often leads to compromise. All of a sudden, you're chasing resources through unethical means or prioritizing immediate gratification or competing out of fear. Kingdom patience, on the other hand, is rooted in trust. It recognizes that God's timing is perfect and that the transfers He orchestrates are calibrated for maximum impact, not simply speed. Every delay, every pause, every period of stewardship in waiting is a training ground for faithful management, discernment, and strategic action. Preparation during waiting also shapes our character, teaches us humility, gratitude, and discernment. It allows us to recognize the difference between what is merely temporary gain and what is sustainable, kingdom aligned advantage. The resources, influence, and opportunities that God transfers are never random. They are designed for impact and they require a heart, mind, and skill set ready to steward them well. Consider tangible ways you can prepare yourself today. You should be investing in skills that multiply, building the kind of relationships that foster accountability and collaboration, and practice generosity that reflects kingdom values, and also maintain integrity even when no one is watching. Positioning yourself now ensures that when God's provision arrives, you are ready, not just to receive, but to maximize its effect for your life, for your calling, and the kingdom. Patience is not idle. Waiting well is preparation. And preparation ensures that every divine transfer lands in capable hands, producing fruit that endures far beyond this moment right now. When we talk about wealth, our minds immediately go to money, possessions, and visible success. But in God's kingdom, wealth is far broader and far deeper than what fits into a bank account. True divine redistribution includes influence, relationships, wisdom, opportunities, and access. These are forms of wealth that the world often overlooks or undervalues, yet they have lasting impact and can multiply far beyond material assets. Consider influence. The ability to shape decisions, guide others, or inspire change is a powerful resource. When God places influence in your hands, it is a form of wealth because it carries authority, responsibility, and the potential to advance kingdom purposes. Relationships are also a form of wealth. The connections you cultivate with people who share integrity and wisdom and vision and purpose become a form of wealth that deepens over time. These relationships shape your environment, they strengthen your character, and they position you to grow in ways that material resources alone cannot achieve. When you invest in people who are aligned with where God is taking you, you gain more than companionship or encouragement. You gain partners in purpose who understand the assignment on your life. Their insight sharpens you, their faith supports you, and their presence opens doors that would have remained closed if you tried to walk alone. The networks you build and steward with care often become channels through which God releases provision, influence, and clarity because He uses people just as much as He uses systems. These connections evolve into pathways for impact and blessing, forming a kind of spiritual and practical infrastructure that carries you into the next season that God has prepared you for. Wisdom is another invisible asset. Understanding timing, having discernment when making your decisions, And having the ability to act in alignment with God's principles is wealth that cannot be stolen or devalued. Opportunities, which are doors that open through preparation, reputation, and faithful obedience, are also wealth. God often distributes access strategically, positioning the righteous to benefit in ways that honor his timing and purpose. Access to knowledge, access to mentorship, or key resources allow you to leverage material wealth in ways that multiply its effect. Ask yourself how you define wealth. If your measure relies solely on currency or possessions, you're limiting the kingdom perspective. God's redistribution encompasses these invisible strategic forms of provision precisely because they endure and impact beyond immediate circumstances. The righteous are positioned to receive and steward not just money, but influence and insight and relational capital. Resources that often create ripple effects across communities, generations, and various spheres of life. Reflect on what you have already received beyond material wealth today. How are you investing influence? How are you nurturing your relationships? How are you cultivating wisdom? And are you recognizing opportunities? These assets are just as real and just as powerful as money, and they are often the vehicles through which God's kingdom work expands. True stewardship considers the full scope of what God provides, and it multiplies far beyond what we can immediately see. Today, shift your mindset. Recognize that wealth is multidimensional, and measure your success not just by what you hold in your hand, but by how you steward influence and relationships and wisdom and access. These are the enduring treasures of the kingdom, and they are part of the divine redistribution that elevates the righteous. It's tempting to watch the world and feel frustrated. You see people succeeding through shortcuts, manipulation, or outright selfishness, and can make you question whether integrity and faithfulness are truly rewarding. But in God's kingdom, the rules are different. The righteous prosper without compromise. The advantages they receive are not fleeting. They are aligned with purpose, provision, and divine timing. Observing this reality is not theatrical. It's a practical thing. It shapes how we act, how we choose, and how we steward every resource that God entrusts to us. Every choice, every decision, every step of obedience either positions you for the righteous advantage or moves you away from it. Integrity matters because God's provision is calibrated to align with character. The blessings and opportunities and influence and resources that flow to the righteous are never arbitrary. They are measured and distributed according to faithfulness, stewardship, and alignment with his principles. Compromise might bring temporary gain, but it undermines access to the enduring kingdom level advantage that God orchestrates. Faith alignment is central to this principle. Your spiritual posture, rooted in trust and obedience and patience and discernment, shapes your readiness to recognize, to receive, and wisely steward the provision that God has already set in motion for your life. The righteous advantage is not just about what comes into your hands. It's about how well positioned you are to manage, multiply, and deploy it for lasting impact. The world can offer immediate, visible rewards, but they are often fragile or short-lived. God's advantage is sustainable. God's advantage is enduring, and it's transformative, benefiting not just the individual, but others around them and generations to come. Examine your choices today. Are your decisions guided by principle, integrity, and obedience, or by convenience, fear, and worldly desire? Are you stewarding what God has already provided in a way that multiplies advantage, or are opportunities being wasted through compromise? Being righteous does not guarantee a problem-free life, but it guarantees that when God moves, you are positioned to receive advantage that lasts far beyond the immediate moment. The righteous advantage is not luck or coincidence. It is the natural result of living in alignment with God's economy. It rewards obedience and faithfulness and integrity while exposing the fragility of worldly accumulation. Position yourself deliberately. Act faithfully. Align your heart, align your resources and your decisions with God's principles. When you do, you not only prosper, you prosper without compromise, walking fully in the advantage that only the righteous can enjoy. When we look at the world, our attention naturally gravitates towards what appears immediate, such as the pursuit of wealth, the rise of power, and the fleeting successes that human effort produces. Life often feels urgent and unfair, and competition seems relentless. Yet the appearance of advantage can be deceptive. Those who pursue selfish gain may accumulate and hoard, but their efforts are temporary. while the righteous experience patience and faithful alignment with God's timing. God sees far beyond what we perceive, and his justice and provision and blessing flow continuously, operating on an eternal scale that far surpasses any temporary human accumulation. Human wealth is fragile. It can vanish overnight, it can be stolen, it can be mismanaged or lost through circumstance. Influence can fade, relationships can break, and even success built over decades can crumble overnight. Yet God's flow never stops. It moves continuously, correcting iniquities, redistributing resources, and ensuring that what is aligned with his kingdom purposes persists, making sure that it multiplies and impacts lives far beyond what we can even imagine. While the world chases immediate results, God orchestrates enduring outcomes. The eternal flow also highlights the difference between accumulation and stewardship. When we recognize that God governs every resource, every opportunity, and every form of wealth, it changes how we engage with what we already have. We stop chasing temporary gain or competing with fear. Instead, we steward what God has entrusted to us. We participate in kingdom provision and position ourselves to receive what he is continuously distributing. This perspective nurtures patience. It helps us operate with wisdom and faithful action because we understand that the eternal flow is far more reliable than anything humans can accumulate. Think about the blessings that you have already received. Are you seeing how these blessings can expand beyond today, growing in influence, strengthening relationships, and advancing purpose, so that what you steward now, today, multiplies into lasting impact? Are you aligning yourself with God's eternal economy rather than just seeking the next immediate reward? When you view provision through this lens, waiting becomes a discipline, stewardship becomes sacred, and faithfulness becomes the key that unlocks continuous kingdom-aligned impact. Ultimately, God's eternal flow reminds us that life, resources, and influence are never truly controlled by the world's standards. The temporary successes of the wicked may seem impressive, but they are fleeting. The righteous, grounded in faith and obedience, tap into a continuous divine current of provision that reshapes lives and communities and generations. Understanding and participating in this flow allows you to live with security. It builds your confidence and anchors you in purpose, trusting that God's kingdom is always advancing, always providing, and always eternal. Christmas is a powerful reminder of God's orchestration. Today, as we celebrate, it's important to pause and recognize the greatest act of divine redistribution in history. Jesus. God, in his infinite wisdom and sovereignty, chose to restore what we lost after humanity's fall. Through Christ's life and death and resurrection, access to God's favor and grace and provision, once blocked by sin, was open again to everyone who believes. This is not just a story from the past. It is a reality that shapes how we live, how we manage resources, how we steward influence, and align ourselves with kingdom purposes today. Jesus' story shows us that God's economy is fundamentally different from the world's. While the world measures success by accumulation, power, temporary advantage, God measures provision and blessing by alignment with his will and purpose. The birth of Christ represents the ultimate redistribution. God's favor, mercy, and access made available to the righteous and those willing to receive it through faith. Every act of obedience, of stewardship, and integrity positions us to participate in this divine economy where resources and influence and wisdom and opportunity flow according to his timing and design. To rest in divine orchestration is to trust that God sees everything. He sees our efforts. He understands our intentions. He sees our struggles, and he is actively moving all things toward his kingdom purposes. Righteousness aligns our hearts, actions, and resources with his plan. It's not about striving in fear or comparison, but about faithfully participating and trusting and stewarding what God has already placed in our hands. When we live in this reality, we're not anxious about what the world accumulates or hoards, because we understand that God's provision is measured, purposeful, and eternal. This Christmas, consider the profound implications of God's orchestration. Through Jesus, the ultimate redistribution of grace and favor is available. Our access to God is restored. Our ability to participate in his kingdom economy is reopened. We can receive provision and steward it wisely so that it multiplies with eternal significance. And this gift surpasses material wealth or influence or opportunity because it aligns us with the Creator. It enables us to walk confidently in obedience while assuring us that every blessing is woven into a divine plan. As we recognize its depth, we understand that nothing we hold is merely temporary, and every act of faithful stewardship participates in God's enduring design, allowing His provision to produce lasting impact in our lives and the lives of others. Celebrate today with gratitude. Rest in His orchestration and trust in His timing. Participate fully in the kingdom work before you. And as you do, allow the reality of Christmas to transform how you see God's provision, how you see His redistribution, and the life that you are called to steward. I want you to have a very Merry Christmas, knowing that the greatest gift has already been given, and through it, all things are made new.